I wanted to turn first to Marcelo Lu, who's president of BASF Canada. And this is part, obviously, of a major global company that is evaluating its options at present in terms of investing in Canada, in the battery supply chain in Canada. Marcelo, how does Canada appear to you as a place where you want to encourage your company to put money?
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity of speaking today. And of course, I will focus on the areas where we are mostly involved, which is in the battery space. Yeah, electrification is a very broad segment, but for us, what we're really talking about, or what I would like to talk about, is the battery space and a main component of electrification. So if I can just parallel the potential that Canada has in the battery space, I would compare it to the ag sector. So if you think about the ag sector, basically we are not only producing food here in Canada for ourselves, for Canadians, but also we help feed the world. And I think the aspiration that I think Canada should have is we should not be only thinking about battery and electrification and storage capabilities for Canada, but also for the world, because, and I'll get to in a second, the resources are very ripe here to be able to do that. Yeah. When we look at electrification, we always need to look at market size, and there is always incentives that need to be put in place. Why would you invest something in Canada, given its market size? Yeah. But if you look at Norway, it has done very well on the market side. On the industry side, there could also be a discussion. Well, the industry is too small for it to be able to be developed in a way that you have a lead position in technology to be able to drive this. But I would say Japan, Germany, although Canada has a smaller economy than those, but I would argue that this is something that we need to aspire. It doesn't have the market size, but it does have the industry capability, which I think we can all agree and maybe can get into here. There are four main aspects that I would argue that would drive electrification and let's say battery investments going forward. And of course, one is the regulatory framework. There needs to be a regulatory framework from a national level trickling down to cities on how electric vehicles are put in place, and also, of course, how the infrastructures are regulated. The other one is, of course, charging infrastructure, which is a main one. And I think that's an obvious one before you get it. Customer acceptance is also very important and not to be forgotten. And I think there are a lot of car types that we use in Canada, which is very difficult to electrify, at least with the current range that batteries have at the moment, like the pickup trucks. If you think about a lot of the working sites on the construction, but also in rural areas, that is used. And of course, then you have the technology and cost that is associated with this, and the cost of batteries need to come down in order to be able to make it affordable. If I do a rapid firing of some figures, which I want to put into context, if you look at China, and of course this is an outlier, but just think about this. China has injected already, as of end of 2018, $5.5 billion into subsidies that go into this. It has 5 million charging poles, stations. It has 61 brands of EV vehicles, and it has 60% of the capacity of lithium-ion battery production. If you look at the market opportunity, I think you mentioned a bunch of these numbers, but from 2018 to 2023, there will be a growth from 12 models being issued a year to 72 models being issued every year by 2023. The growth rate is expected to stay at 22% compounded growth rate. So this is an enormous opportunity of what is there. Now, going back to, I think, one of the topics that Diana, you mentioned, and I think Jerry would be very interested, is how this is going to be a shift in the manufacturing. If you look at the powertrains for internal combustion engine, 70% of the engine make up that cost, but that is only 25% of the cost of the vehicle. In comparison, for the vehicles that are EV, electric charged, instead of 25% of the cost of the vehicle, it's actually 60% of the cost of the vehicle, which puts an enormous amount of pressure to be able to drive down the cost of the battery itself. Yeah, and if you think about that, Canada really has all the ingredients. It is rich in nickel, in cobalt, which is our main ingredients for lithium ion. It has lithium. I mean, I think we have Mr. Sohi here, and he knows that from his time in Enercan, how rich the country is in these resources. Yeah, and one thing to just finish before I talk about one policy idea is we all talk about electrification, but it's very, very important that we don't lose the circular aspect. When we electrify vehicles, people buy usually vehicles for 4 to 5 years, but battery materials, batteries are useful for 10 to 15 years. So there needs to be an ecosystem developed that we are reusing, recycling before we're thinking about disposing of the battery itself. So that is, again, further jobs that can be created on this reuse and recycling side. Now, to the investment, and then I finish. We are, of course, looking at jurisdictions where we can put, some money and investment in this. In Europe, we have a good foothold. Of course, the market size of Asia is very attractive, but we must have a hub also in North America to address the North American needs. And I believe that Canada is ripe more than US and Mexico to contribute for this because, again, it has the resources. So one of the ideas that we've been discussing and floating is, look, we need to tip the scale that it comes to Canada, yeah? And with all the stimulus money, all the recovery money that is being put into the system, one idea is to share some of the burden that companies would have to at least have an anchor to start this ecosystem. Yeah, I think that there's a domino effect once you have the anchor. We are happy to try to be that one. And what we are saying is that there needs to be a sharing of that cost to really tip the scale, whatever that may be. Yeah. So I leave it at that. The job multiplier numbers for the chemical sector, but the manufacturing sector is around 7 to 10. So for every one job that we create there's 7 to 10 that are created directly or indirectly. So from that, I think we're in a good position. Hopefully I addressed most of the topics needed. Yeah?